So, what is the general lesson lecture format? Well, first, we will teach you a lesson, and then we will give you some assignments, some homework. And this is where the real learning takes place. When you go all by yourself and solve these problems or whatever the homework is, this is where you can really learn. Second, when we get back, together we will do the homework, the assignments, solve the problems, whatever it is that you did at home by yourself. We intentionally are casual, so it's not intimidating, and we can be ourselves, and you can be yourself. Another good thing about this is that we will shoot our lectures in different places around Puerto Rico. For example, the beach, or who knows where. It's going to be an adventure. And you can do this on your own time because it's online, so there is no pressure, and we hope you love it.
Building off of Damaris's discussion as to how the Learning with the Fosters courses and typical individual lectures or lessons are structured, let's now spend just a few moments and talk about the same idea, how are the courses and the lectures structured, but more from a methodological or philosophical perspective. For simplicity's sake, we can think of learning courses or tutoring sessions or things like that, kind of along a spectrum that I've drawn here, with the two ends, the two extremes being, and again, this is somewhat oversimplified in general, but I think it'll help illustrate what we're attempting to work with here. At one end of this spectrum, this learning spectrum, or this course or tutoring spectrum, and this is often the end that I would get requested to do tutoring for people studying for the SATs or the ACTs or the GRE, things like that. Also part of what disillusioned me from tutoring also as well. But this end of the spectrum, we are looking, or the students or the learners are looking for quick, user-friendly methods to essentially cram for a test or to get a right answer consistently, to get a good score on the test or the course. The focus is more on the correct answer. What is the answer to this problem? What is the answer to, or what is the solution to this mathematical problem? That's kind of one extreme end. Very uninterested in why the answer is what it is, or how to solve other problems of a similar nature, but much more interested in getting correct answers for usually a very limited set of problems or circumstances. The other end would be more for like a formal course, where rigor and exhaustion is really a fundamental characteristic of the course. Things are detailed rigorously, they're exhaustive in content, and by the way, I think that's the correct end. That's the way courses should be structured. But the focus is much more on understanding the answer, the hows, the whys, etc., as to just simply what is the answer, or simply what is a mechanical, efficient way to obtain the answer. Now, just to clarify, right answers do matter. They matter incredibly much. But I will argue at a different time with more time that to understand why something is true or why something is false or why an answer is what it is much more beneficial and much more important than simply being able to regurgitate or produce a correct answer, albeit it is correct. One quick example. I remember when we were, I think it was like third grade or second grade, whatever it was, when we were expected to start learning the multiplication tables. When I got to the eights, those were very challenging. 8 times 7, 8 times 6, 8 times 8. And so it is all memorizing. 8 times 8 equals 64. Well, simply knowing the answer to that one problem was great, especially when it came to those timed quizzes we had to take. But by understanding the process, being able to draw, okay, a group of 8 times, and then even painstakingly having to go through and count those, understanding why the answer is what it is, allowed me to answer really an infinite number of multiplication problems, understanding what that multiplication operator actually is and what it actually does. And of course, that's not entirely analogous to every situation we have, but I think it's sufficient to get the point across. Just kind of by my rhetoric and what we've talked about, I think you can tell that I'm much more impressed with this end of the spectrum than I am this end. And you're absolutely correct. I don't have much time for this end of the spectrum at this stage of my life. So where do learning with the Fosters fit in along this spectrum? Well, naturally, it somewhat depends on the subject we're in, and within that subject, the particular topic that we're dealing with. Generally, we are somewhere between the halfway mark and maybe the 3/4 mark, sometimes overlapping a little bit farther to each end of the spectrum. So in other words, we're going to be much more focused on understanding how and why, or what is going on with a solution, rather than simply being able to produce a solution. But we're going to be less rigorous and less exhaustive than if we were in, say, a formal course. Again, whether that be a junior high or university course, or a private course of some other nature. But generally, we will be within this range. And we think that's an appropriate range where it doesn't require some of the background or the prerequisite needed to go into the rigor and the exhaustive content that is needed for more of a formal course. But at the same time, we're really not interested in just giving you a lot of information and having you be able to reproduce that information, even if it is correct. Our focus is much more on understanding the answer rather than simply being able to produce the answer. Allow me, if you will, to quickly get a little Merlin, a term that my wife uses, that Damaris uses, when I get a little bit passionate or even sometimes a little bit cranky on an issue. It's usually involving some sort of philosophical position or thought process. And by Merlin, she's of course referring to the Arthurian wizard Merlin, primarily in the great cartoon, one of the greatest cartoons of all time, The Sword and the Stone. So that Merlin, that kind of cranky old man with the long white beard and the blue hat, that's what she's referring to when she says I'm a little bit Merlin. But let me get a little bit Merlin for just a tiny bit of time regarding the two ends of the spectrum that we've been talking about. My experience teaching and tutoring a wide variety of ages in a wide variety of locations, from junior high through high school, through college, through non-traditional ages who are either attempting to get their GRE, SAT, or GED, or some other reason for learning, both on the mainland United States and within Puerto Rico. I've noticed a few trends. We live in an age where, for better or worse, there's a lot of information. Incredible amounts of information available. And some of it is very good, and some of it is very useful. Some of it, arguably a lot of it, is garbage or wasted information. We're overstimulated with a lot of information. So it's important not just to know an answer or to know a truth, but to be able to evaluate that truth, to evaluate that answer. But also, and this is the point that I really am hoping to make here, with respect to our kind of philosophy as to how we're going to progress through these courses, we've developed kind of a short attention span academically or intellectually, based on my experience as a student and as I mentioned, as tutoring and teaching quite a wide variety of ages and locations. Oftentimes we become interested in a subject, whether it's we have to be because we're in a course or whether we just are curious and we want to learn. But for whatever reason, it seems trend that if we can't look on the internet and find an article about this length that fully explains whatever it is we're interested in, all of a sudden that is too long. If you have to scroll down a few times, or heaven forbid read a book, or check various notes and resources and make sure your sources are decent, that all of a sudden sounds like a lot of work, and it surpasses a lot of our academic attention span. In short, we want to diminish complex, important topics, subjects, truths to very fast food, easy to digest, quick granules that satisfy our understanding. And the problematic thing with that, among others, is we think that is actually learning. We think that we can read a small article on a very complicated subject, whatever it may be, and think that we are sufficiently knowledgeable in that. Or we think that once we see that this subject may require a little bit more reading, a little bit more learning, all of a sudden we're not that interested in it anymore. From my perspective, that's not a good thing. So that goes back to part of why we are focusing much more on that other end of the spectrum, more towards the formal, the rigorous, the exhaustive side, if nothing else, to help to elongate our modern or postmodern, however you want to deem it, academic attention spans. Fortunately, I think, I won't say unfortunately, but fortunately, I think most things in life that are sufficiently complicated, sufficiently interesting, sufficiently important are also not easily relegated to a small one-page article. So therefore, it requires much more time, much more space, and much more critical thinking as we work through not just what this given topic or subject is, but again, importantly, why is it that we believe that? What about it? How does it work? All those nuances are so much more important and require so much more time than simply just arriving at an answer. We can prematurely arrive at an answer, and even if it's a correct answer, we may just be accepting it on so-called blind faith because, well, that's about the only amount of effort we wish to put into it. So our courses are intentionally designed not to allow for that. So if you're into, or if you're solely seeking kind of a fast approach in order to solve a problem or pass a test, this probably isn't the resource for you. We will spend a lot of time, most of our time, working through and understanding the hows and the whys that go into these certain processes, these certain subjects. But without scaring you off, we also will take it very slow. It's online. You can go at your own speed and your own pace. And it will, I promise, be much less rigorous than a full-blown course, either at, say, the college or the high school level. But we will certainly focus on much more on the understanding, the why, than we will just the correct answer. And to be very honest, that's going to take a lot more time than perhaps we're at least initially ready to commit. I would encourage you, or I'd like to encourage you, to consider putting in that time, whether that's with us or whether that's by yourself or some other institution, when it comes to learning something, especially if it's something important. Consider putting in the time and the effort necessary to adequately, even if not comprehensively, but at least adequately understand not just what that subject is or what that topic is, but also some of the highs, and, or not the highs, the hows and the whys that go along with it. And that's the approach that we are unashamedly and also not willing to negotiate on when it comes to learning with the Fosters. I think it can be fun, and I think that it is a very essential part of learning. Thank you for indulging me a Merlin moment.
Okay, so concerning education, let's go through this 2 ways of learning. Memorizing or learning. This one is a quick way that you can put information in your head. And sometimes we tend to memorize because it's quick and we like things quick. We live in an era that everything is quick. I rather do learning. It will take time and effort, but I will explain why learning is better than memorizing. I am a visual learner, so I'm going to show you what I think happens in our brain when we memorize or when we learn. So, this can is our brain. It's empty. We're going to take a test or a presentation. So what are we going to do? We're going to put information in there. I memorize the onion. I memorize this. I memorize this. I memorize this. I memorize this. And I memorize this. Okay, my brain is full. I memorize all these things. Now the day of the test is here. So I have this paper, which is a test. And what am I going to do? I'm going to dump all this that I memorized on that paper. Now all that I memorized is on that paper. That's good. But what happened to my brain? It's empty. That is negative. Let's see what happened when you learn. When you learn, it's not just something quick. It will take time. It's going to be a process. It's not just going to be for a test or for a presentation. It's just something that you do in your life. You're always learning. So let's put information in. Things that we're learning. Things that we're learning. Things that we're learning. Things that we're learning. can take a test, we can take a order presentation, years can go by, and this can will never be empty. Because you learn the material, not just memorize it, and then you just throw it into a paper or a presentation. But you learn it. You know the material inside out. You know how to do it. You know what it is. And nobody can take it away from you. That is the benefit of learning versus memorizing.